Wolfgang Koester, CEO of Fireapps. Wolfgang, you must be busy these days when we talk about the volatility.
Yeah, I mean, volatility is highest it's ever been, movements all over, and it's not just anymore, though I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about euro versus dollar, but it's about lots of currencies. It's euro, Swiss franc catching people off guard. It's Brazil keeps going up, and what do people do with that? Chile, you got currencies moving everywhere.
Let's focus on the euro for just a minute. A lot of people asking, can the euro nations stay together? Can the euro continue to exist? You don't think it can?
No. No, I don't. I really think that at some point, when you look at Germany and France, they're going to have to make a decision. Do they want to keep funding all the countries that are not doing very well at all? And you just saw again now Greece rising again to the news. And when you really look at it, that's only 2.5% of GDP of Europe. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But they're looking at 60 billion euros worth of financing in the future. Yes, they just had a little bit of a treasury bills, their bills raise on it. But it's really not. They're not out of the problems at all.
What do you tell a company that has a lot of euro exposure? How are they supposed to hedge against that currency going away or countries dropping out?
Well, the number one thing I tell them all is, look, you need to really understand your exposures. You need to understand where it's coming from. That's not easy for these corporations because they got systems all over the place. They don't have euros just in Europe. They may be having them in China. They'll have them in Japan. They'll have them in the United States. What does all that mean? And really understand that. And that's, as I said, not easy. And once you have that, then you got to make a decision of how much risk are you willing to take. And you need to manage towards that. Lots of corporations right now call the risk that they're willing to take plus minus zero around zero. No risk.
I want to get to that in just a moment. Some of these companies that you call currency agnostic and some that are not really hedging and overly exposed. But let's talk about the dollar for just a moment. It's the main reserve currency. Let's use this interesting soundbite, though, from George Soros, who says it may be the main reserve currency, at least in name, but not in practice.
The big question whether the U.S. dollar should be the main reserve currency. And in fact, it no longer is, because it maybe accounts for 2/3 of the monetary reserves. But the euro is an alternative, and there's a lot of diversification into other currencies.
Oh, so he's actually saying that the euro is an alternative, but a lot of people, of course, looking at the yuan. In fact, I think there was a Goldman Sachs private equity deal today that is denominated in yuan.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on reserve currency? Should we be worried as Americans about that? What does that mean in terms of life as a company, life as a taxpayer?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is when you're looking at it, the U.S. dollar is still it. I know what Mr. Soros is trying to get there, but you got to look at, okay, we talked a little bit about the structural problems in Europe. Well, China isn't ready for that either yet. I mean, they still have a long ways to go. That would mean free flowing of the currencies, all these things that they're discussing. So for right now and for the foreseeable future, I don't actually see that changing at all.
So here's an interesting poll that we did on the yuan. You know, we've been in the midst of all these U.S.-China trade talks. The government has promised that it's going to be making a more flexible yuan exchange rate at some point. And a poll of ours, of investors, said that they think the yuan will become convertible within 5 years. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think they're going to slowly but surely get there. And like the Vice Premier said, don't politicize it. Let economics manage that process. So yes, that's very possible.
All right, let's quickly talk about the companies that are currency agnostic or do a good job, I suppose, of hedging themselves. Now, are these a list of companies that you actually think you'd buy or actually just do a good job of maintaining their volatility as it relates to currency moves?
I think these companies are very good at managing their risk, and I think that's part of what corporations should be able to do. So if you're looking at these companies and saying, look, I'm looking at an Accenture versus their competitor, and Accenture is doing a very good job managing their risk and somebody else isn't, surprises do not get rewarded if they're positive in the stock market, whereas negative surprises get punished. So if you're currency agnostic, you're focusing on your business, you're not worrying about other currencies because you know you've got that under control. You know, it's a cash flow predictability issue. At that point, you're going to buy Accenture and sell the competitors.
They're not trying to be currency hedge funds.
Right, exactly.
Right, so you are investing in a company that's making money off of its operations, sort of purely and not having these blips because of currency moves.
Exactly right.
All right, Wolfgang, thanks so much. Really appreciate the insight.
Pleasure.
Would love to have you back. Thanks to Wolfgang Koester. He's the CEO of Fireapps, an advisor to many companies on how to hedge currency exposure.